Hey guys, this is Draco with Legends in Our Free Time, and I'm recording another chess match for you guys. This is a non-legend match. This is just a match with a random user that I had quite a while ago on chess.com, and there I used the game editor there to record all of my matches after they're finished so that I can go over them again. So we'll generally see how this one goes. I was playing white, he was playing black. We had pretty much equal ratings, so it wasn't like I was expecting to get thrashed or to thrash him, since we were rated equal really. So now we'll see how it goes. I start with e5, that's my standard opening move. He does the same, nothing to say about that. This is still standard book opening of the Ruy Lopez line, which is my favourite opening line to go with. So I do the natural progression, knight to f3. Then he responds with queen f6, which it's unconventional, certainly. Normally you'd either respond with knight f6 or with knight f3, to which I would then possibly respond with the bishop move, but developing the queen so early is quite unconventional and perhaps not really advised. As you'll see in the next few moves, I refute this development quite easily, and to be honest, I punish it basically. I move on with d3, opening a space for my bishop. In retrospect, I probably should have moved it into the centre, which would have invited a capture from his pawn, but, like I say, central control, always good. But as it is, I'm pretty much solidifying the defence on the square that my furthermost pawn is occupying. d6, so he's, apart from that queen move, he's basically mirrored all of my moves so far. Move my bishop out to g5, like I said, threatening his queen, and of course he cannot recapture it because of the knight defending it, so he basically has to play a passive defensive move here. So he plays queen g6. I bring my knight out to d2, just bringing it a little closer to the action. He plays h6, attacking my bishop, which is a bit like, maybe, I don't know. So I have to also move my bishop back e3, which is still a good square. It's still defending the flanks fairly well, and it's attacking two long diagonals, whilst also not really getting in the way of any of my pieces, since obviously my knights can just hop around. My other bishop occupies the light squares instead of the dark squares, and my queen is going to have some light square diagonals to work with shortly. Brings his bishop out to g4, so he's quickly going on an attack and threatening my knight. But I'm thinking here, whatever, I may as well bring my other bishop out, and if I move my knight and he goes for it, worst that happens is that it's an equal trade. He brings his knight out to c6, another just standard development move, and now h4, threatening his queen. And I was thinking here that I might be able to claim a free piece, since he would move his queen to defend it, and then I would be able to swoop in with my bishop. That doesn't happen, however. He just captures his bishop, my bishop, so now obviously the requirement is on me to decide whether at this point I want to trade off the queens or preserve them. Because if I capture his queen with my knight, he's obviously free to just capture my queen with his bishop. I decide to preserve my queen for now. So that's what happens. And his queen then escapes to a central square. So it's still being very passive and just defending. It is controlling space, but it's not making any threats whatsoever at the minute. I castle. g5. So he's basically, I mean, look at the position now. He's got a bit of kingside advancement, yes, but he's only got one minor piece developed, whereas I have all three of my remaining minor pieces developed, and that's because he was bringing his queen out so early and just shuffling it around. This is why you don't develop your queen so early, because it stops you developing any other part of your position, and it really doesn't benefit you in the long run, so remember that, guys. Knight f5, this was a bit of a waiting / passive move, because I thought I may as well bring it into a more central position, plus it's protected by the pawn, so he can't exactly recapture. Threatens with his own knight, so like, okay, whatever. So I then defend with my queen, so the tension's really building on f5, and there's a lot of pressure being put on it. However, now he plays Whoops, I just moved back. However, now he plays f6, and I see an opportunity for a really cheap check, so I just go for it. I mean, it's not exactly a massive threat since he can defend with the queen, but, you know, it's there. So that's what he does, he defends with the queen, and here, I think to myself, he's really putting a lot of faith in his queen here. He was moving it first, he desperately wants to preserve it, so let's see if he will accept a queen exchange, because I'm convinced that if he accepts a queen exchange, I can make better use of my minor pieces than he can, because he's been, like I say, his play has been really centralised on the queen thus far, whereas I'm quite happy to exchange mine for his. So he does go for it, I recapture, so now the queens are out of the game and the game is going to be a lot more simple at this point. f5, just so that my knight can't capture it freely. Here I make what is in hindsight, I think, a couple of continuous mistakes. The chess engine certainly thought it was a mistake, because I run my games through computer analysis as well, and it definitely thought these moves weren't fantastic. Knight f6 check, which, meh, you know, it's whatever, because his king can immediately move out of check. But then knight d7, aiming to claim his bishop. I generally think that bishops are slightly more valuable than knights because of the extra space and the extra endgame power that they can generally have, but this, in this case, does not justify my long knight run to claim the bishop, because in exchange for claiming the bishop, he gets to move both of his rooks into better positions, which I think is more than compensation for losing the bishop, really, as well, considering I lose the knight as well. We've basically just taken 2 pieces off the board, plus he's been granted a better position, so I don't know. So I capture with f5, his knight recaptures, and it's getting to be a strange position here. I mean, it looks fairly decent. I'm a bit scared of his central control with his rooks, so I decide now to open up the queenside a little bit with some just queenside pawn development. Very standard stuff here, just pawns moving into position, blah blah blah. And the queenside has now been simplified a little bit. He moves pawn to g4, and now is the blunder of the game. This is, if you've been watching like my games so far, both of my uploads, I won those matches. I win this match as well eventually, but here I make the biggest fucking blunder imaginable, and this is proof that I am nowhere near an infallible chess player. I mean, if you look at the board, if you look at it long enough and pause the video, you will come up with ideas of what in this position is the best and worst move available. I make the worst move available here, completely overlooking some defensive needs of my own, and I play f3. My thought process here was that I was perhaps underestimating my opponent. Because of his low rating, I believed at this point that I was better than my rating suggested, whereas this guy had consistently stated his rating, so I thought he's not a fantastic chess player, so he might fall for the bait and he might just recapture my pawn with his pawn. In which case, I can then just bring my rook up to recapture, and then his knight is pinned to the king, so he's essentially just playing with one knight and a couple of rooks on the back row, which aren't really doing much. That, however, doesn't happen at all, and he just snaffles up that bishop with his knight, and I think, shit, what a waste of a move. Because I completely forgot that that pawn was defending the bishop, plus I have to play a passive move now to defend my rook. That was terrible. That was the worst move I've ever made, and I don't think I'll ever forgive myself for that. Jesus Christ. He brings his pawns down more with d5, so his pawns are really starting to invade my territory now, and I'm getting a little scared of this position because now I'm down a minor piece, and in tournament play this might even be a resignable position because I'm down a minor piece, and against really skilled opponents that's not a disadvantage that you can make up for easily, so I'm scared at this point. Rook a6, again, I don't know, it's alright I suppose, but not great by any means, and I'm mainly just scaring the knight, but he responds effectively with bringing his own rook down. And so here I find a little, perhaps, clever attack. I mean, I managed to win a pawn back here because I capture on g4, which wins me a free pawn because he has to defend with his king. So he doesn't even have the option of recapturing the pawn at this point. So he just defends. And then I go in and capture the rook because if I'm down a piece, I definitely don't want him having double rooks on me. So he then recaptures, obviously, blah, blah, blah. I move my rook up to get him back towards the centre, which right now is a bit of a mistake perhaps, but it benefits me a lot later on. I win back the value of my minor piece later by being able to go on a little capturing spree with my knight, which I loved at the time. I thought that was brilliant, and I was very lucky to be able to make up the difference with that later on. I move my H pawn up so that I can fix my pawn structure. You know, otherwise my pawn on g4 is completely hanging and he can just come in and capture it with his knight. So essentially at the minute his knight is doing absolutely nothing. There's only 2 squares that he can move to that are safe, and neither of them really contribute to doing much. They're a bit of a waste of time really. So his knight is effectively useless at this point. And now, bringing his pawn down to d4. This is a mistake. I can just instantly recapture with c4. And then he definitely makes a bit of a mistake with the rook capturing. Because this leads into an attack that I can really exploit. First, rook a6, threatening the knight. So he comes in, king d6. Yeah, he's protecting the knight, except I think he's completely overlooked the fact that I can do this. Knight e4 check, and his options are quite limited here because he can recapture with the rook if he wants, but that means he's going to lose the rook since the pawn is defending that square. His king can't move down to c5 because my other pawn's defending that. So he really doesn't have too many movement options here, and he chooses the worst one available to him, d5. Because now I can just swing around with a bit of a windmill combo. c3 check, again he cannot move to c5 due to my pawn defending, so he has to move back to where he came from. Gives me a free pawn and another check. He moves down to d5 again, so I snaffle up another pawn, check again. And I just swing back around the way I came with check once again, and I decide, you know what, yes I will go for the rook. And at this point I have somehow managed to equalise, and I think at this point I was actually slightly ahead in material, so that was a massive comeback for me. His knight recaptures, so like at this point, let me count. Yeah, I'm up 3 pawns. I don't have a minor piece. I'm down by 1 point I think, because I have 3 pawn advantage and a rook advantage, but I think that's still 1 single point of material behind. But for all intents and purposes, that's basically equal-ish, and I massively prefer my pawn majority. And I then widen that majority by snaffling up another free pawn. He moves his knight now, which obviously he's threatening my pawn here, so I may as well defend it. Plus, my kingside pawns are going to be a real thorn on his side anyway, with them moving up and threatening queen promotion. He sets up a 2-pronged attack with his knights, which worries me a little bit since I can't effectively defend the pawn anymore, since one of the knights can come in. If I recapture, then the other knight just captures my rook, and then I'm left only with pawns against a knight and a king, which isn't great. But I just think, you know what, queen promotion time, g5, just push that pawn as much as possible. And he wastes time here. He really should have been focusing on stopping the pawn here. Gives me a chance to escape. Now he starts manoeuvring to sort of do that. And at this point it's clear that he's absolutely desperate to stop this pawn promoting, which I'm fine with. You want to stop the pawn, go ahead, just gives me another free piece. So at this point, things are really, really hopeless for him. He doesn't have any major pieces left, he only has 1 pawn left. There's really nothing doing for him in this position. Yeah, he gets a free pawn, but still, I'm up a pawn and I'm basically up a piece. So, there's nothing doing. he starts moving his pawn down, but I then get my king into the action to start preventing this. The computer analysis also didn't like this series of moves, but it wins me the game just about now, so I definitely like this series of moves. May as well block his pawn off because, you know, yeah, meh, what can you do? And then he makes his own blunder, which completely loses the game for him. This game doesn't even finish because after my next move he resigns because he realises how big a mistake he's made with King d4, which absolutely, unequivocally loses the game for him. Can you see why? Just, you know, pause for a second, look at the position, see. I mean, my next move is incredibly obvious, but see if you can see what it is. Next move is rook d7 check, and this absolutely wins the game for me because, you know, he has to move his king out of the way. Then I can come in and claim the free knight, and he is completely powerless to recapture because he can't move his king next to mine. Then I can just move my rook to swallow up his pawn as well, and again he can't recapture, and then it is literally just his king against my two pawns and my rook and king. So there's absolutely no hope for him in this position, and he just resigned on the spot. So that was a good game, and I'm glad that I got it, and that was a good win for me. Shit.